Mhm.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our chat. My name is Christine, and I'm the program manager at DC Forensic Nurse Examiners. I'll be facilitating our conversation about domestic violence services during COVID-19 in DC. Thank you all for joining us today. As we speak, you will have an opportunity to ask questions later when we have this recording posted, and we will monitor any questions that come in through the comments after the recording, and we will answer those questions in the comments. So today we're joined by our partner, DC Safe, and my colleague from DC Forensic Nurse Examiners. If you want to go ahead, Kylie, and introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Kylie Hogan. I am the Crisis Response Team Director for DC Safe. So we are an organization that's dedicated to the empowerment and assistance with safety for people who are victims of domestic violence, people who survived through incidents of domestic violence. And I work really specialized with a team that provides 24/7 services, but our agency has a lot of depth and things we can offer, and we'll talk about that today.
Great, thank you, Kylie. And Alicia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Alicia. I am the clinical program manager for DC Forensic Nurse Examiners. And our organization is comprised of nurses who have received specialized education and clinical training to be able to provide forensic evaluation for patients. This examination typically includes everything from history taking to documentation, photographing injuries, and also providing resources, which we will get into here later.
Thank you, Alicia. So Kylie, can you tell us a little bit more about DC Safe, your mission, and the services that you provide?
Sure. So we at DC Safe have been around since about 2006. We specialize, like I said, in working with victims of domestic violence, but particularly where our expertise really lies is in providing advocacy for survivors of intimate partner violence. So those people who've had dating or romantic relationships, have kids together, things like that. We do that in a variety of ways. One of the big ways, and kind of particularly my piece of the puzzle at DC Safe, is crisis intervention services. So trying to meet people kind of immediately or as close to immediately after an incident has happened in order to try to provide some services for their safety kind of as closely after that domestic violence incident as we can. But we also do that through court services. So we work very closely with the courts, particularly around orders of protection, and then also system reform. So one of the things that we find through what we do and how we work is we sit with the client at a junction of a lot of different agencies and organizations. So we are constantly listening to what the clients say about the services, seeing the struggles and barriers they may have in accessing them. And we're always looking to try to then go back to those partner agencies and organizations to say, hey, can we do this better? This is where we're struggling. So that's a big part of what we do and who we are. Our services can be pretty varied, and we try to, again, meet our clients where they are depending on their needs. So that could be everything from someone needs an Uber to their sister's house at 3 o'clock in the morning, to somebody needs a place to stay for the night or for the next few nights, or needs help working on longer term resources, to helping somebody draft a petition for an order of protection to make sure it's in those professional court words, and explaining to them really basically, if you want to do this, this is how that might look for you. This is how the process usually works. I often say one of the biggest things that we do for people is try to provide them an idea of what to expect. We know it's a really scary time when people are trying to leave an abusive relationship. And one of the best and most helpful things that we can do is try to tell people what to expect, so that when they're ready to move forward with that, they're really moving forward in an informed way, and in a way that hopefully they get to have the most freedom and most power in the situation to do what's right for them.
Great, thank you for that. Alicia, can you tell us a bit more about DC Forensic Nurse Examiners and the services that you provide, and really kind of define for us what's a medical forensic exam and what happens during those exams?
Absolutely. Thank you, Christine. So DC Forensic Nurse Examiners is a nonprofit organization that treats both sexual assault and domestic violence out here in the district. We see survivors from every walk of life and do our best to provide them with forensic services. The way that we work closely with DC Safe in that they are the advocates for survivors of intimate partner violence, whereas we are the trained medical professionals that actually provide the examinations. Those examinations typically will, well, once we receive the referral, or if a patient presents wanting to get an examination, we do a full head to toe to assess the injuries. This is done to let the survivors know what exactly our findings are and how that informs treatment. We also provide, if there's a need for further documentation, we can use photography. We also have various adjunct techniques that we can look for to determine injury. And this is very helpful for our patients, especially those who have survived domestic violence in any way, but with a special component regarding strangulation. If someone has been strangled by their partner, the signs may vary, and a common misconception is that, oh, well, I feel better now. However, if someone is strangled, there can be delayed medical problems that can result in death. So we not only provide the medical examination, but we also like to provide a lot of education about what this means for the patients, what this means for their body, and the best steps to take moving on. If the survivor does end up going through the legal process, all of the evidence collection, and by evidence collection, I mean all of the dialogue that we have, the narratives, the photography, all of that counts as evidence. If the survivor goes through the legal process, then that evidence is used, our charts are used, and we continue to follow them all the way through the legal system.
Thank you, Alicia. You talked a little bit about strangulation, and I know oftentimes it's referred to as choking. Can you talk a little bit more about, the frequency, how frequent you might see choking, and what are some of the dangers of that, and why I should come and have a physical exam?
Sure. I think that one of the most important things to remember about the difference between strangulation and choking is something that happens if you are choking on a piece of food, if your air pipe is obstructed, something is occluding in this area. However, strangulation is an external force that occludes all of your circulatory system up here. So not only is your airway impaired, but there are so many other very sensitive areas right here that also get blocked. And that's ultimately what makes it so dangerous. To completely close this area off, it actually only takes 10 seconds of pressure, and full brain death can occur in just a matter of minutes. We take this very, very seriously. This is one of the most dangerous things that a human being can do to another human being. So if you go in and we evaluate you for strangulation symptoms, we're going to be looking for difficulty breathing, coughing, all of that, anything that has to do with the throat area. But you can also have other symptoms that stem from your brain, such as, you know, confusion, changes in behavior. The symptoms are just widespread, and that's why we encourage people to come in and receive an exam, because there are things that we can, as medical professionals, are able to see that you at home may not be able to see, that may actually be life-threatening injuries.
Yeah, and if I can jump in there, I think this is one of the reasons we really value our partnership with DCFNE, because while we know the research and we know how dangerous it is, it's so great to be able to refer to you all and really have a nurse talk our clients through how dangerous it is. Strangulation is a huge indicator that someone is in a very high risk relationship. And when I say high risk, I mean high risk to be reassaulted, but also to be killed. And it's something that unfortunately is very, very common with the clients that we see, particularly the intimate partner clients. And it's something that people tend to not take so seriously, like you mentioned earlier, where people say, oh, well, I feel okay now, I'm not going to worry about it. And we've really stressed to them and try to get them connected to you so you can really inform them about the dangers there. I just always think back, we had one client who, you know, we referred over to you guys at DCFNE. They because of that information, they went in, they got some medical care and some scans, and they found kind of a weakened artery or vein. I can't remember which. I'm not the medical expert, but they found a weakening there, and she was at real risk to having an aneurysm because of it. So it's something that people don't take seriously, and I really, really stress that they should. And we're so happy that, you know, we can refer them to you and get them in to be seen for that.
Yes, thank you. And this is always a difficult conversation or topic to discuss. But what we want to do is we want to empower our survivors with this education so that they know the risk and can make decisions based off of that. And the risk ultimately is that if your partner has strangled you during domestic violence, the chances of them actually killing you are 7 times higher. This is very, very serious, not only medically in the moment, but as a predictor for future lethal violence.
Absolutely.
Thank you both for highlighting that. What I really wanted to kind of uplift in what you just said is this sounds like a very empowering way and making sure that survivors are leading both the exam and the services that they want to receive from DC Safe and from DC Forensic Nurse Examiners. So let's kind of transition a bit now and talk about COVID. And Kylie, can you kind of tell us about how COVID has impacted the way that you're providing services to survivors now? I know this has been very challenging for many service providers and for survivors alike. So we'd love to kind of understand the barriers that you're facing so far and kind of how you guys are operating now in COVID.
Sure. So typically when someone's interacting with DC Safe, they're going to do so usually in 3 different layers, and they may not need all of them, or they may. And kind of the first and foremost is our response line. So we operate a 24/7 response line. And we're a little different than a lot of people think about when they think about a domestic violence hotline, in that we really try to be a resource for first responders in the community. So hospitals, police officers, social workers. We know that our survivors are out there telling someone that there's a problem, and we don't want those service providers to just check a little domestic violence box and send them on their way. We want them to make a referral to us so that, you know, you're not telling your story 8 different times. You get your help when you're ready to talk about it and ask for it. And then we want to pick up from there. So we've been operating that response line for a long, long time. And because we were a little technologically ahead of the curve, that really has been able to stay the same. We have voice over internet phones. We never had to drop the response line. We just kept it going and sent phones home in everyone's house. So everybody has their little desk. One of the biggest programs that we have that's been impacted is our supportive advocacy services. So the response line really is going to try to say, what's your need right now and how can I fix that? And then let's bring you in to sit down and talk to someone and have a longer conversation. And that's where our supportive advocacy team comes in. So after that first 24 to 48 hours, we want to hand you off to someone who can have a longer, deeper conversation. Typically, those advocates work out of the 2 domestic violence intake centers, which are kind of like little one-stop shops for people who are experiencing domestic violence, where they can talk to the courts, they can talk to an advocate, they can talk to an attorney, and they're all together. And of course, now because of COVID, those 2 locations are not open. So we no longer have that ability for someone to kind of drop in person. So we've done a lot of shifting and trying to identify the clients who need that resource and connect them via phone. I think everyone during COVID has a little bit of phone fatigue, right? Because that's how so many of us are doing our services, and people are having to access services. So I think, you know, it can be a challenge to have a 30-minute or an hour-long conversation with someone on the phone, not being able to see them face to face. And we're kind of doing our best to try to make people as comfortable with that as possible and still be able to offer everything we would offer in that space, whether that's drafting a petition, whether that's being able to get in real nitty-gritty and deep about someone's housing needs or the barriers that they're facing around their benefits. So we're still having those long conversations. We've just kind of shifted it to the phone, and we're doing our best we can to make sure that people are comfortable and prepared and not overwhelmed by those conversations. We also have our own shelter space. We are really blessed in that our shelter space is individual apartment style units. So that has given us a lot of freedom in COVID, because we're not having to mush a bunch of families together. We've always enjoyed that model because it's let us take mixed families with maybe your mom lives with you and needs to come with you, or you've got adult children, or you have a new partner and the person committing domestic violence in your life is threatening both of you. We've always been really flexible. And now with the global health pandemic, that's come in real handy now too. So we're still placing people. We still have staff there. One of the big things we've done in that realm is really limit our staff contacts. So opposed to being there maybe from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., our staff is kind of rotating through in 4-hour shifts, and our time is a little bit smaller just to try to limit the exposure for everybody. But we're still there, and we're still helping people, and we're still placing people. Our on-call advocates come into that, in that we do placements overnight, and they kind of pick up when the shelter staff isn't there. One of the biggest things we've had to alter, it actually involves with you guys at DCFNE. Typically, those advocates would go out and they'd sit in the hospital and meet with people in person while they're receiving the exam or around the exam. Because we're having to expose them in other areas for placements and ETPOs and dropping off paperwork, we've limited them and said, let's not go to the hospital now and just try to concentrate on that. Somebody has no place to go at 3 o'clock in the morning, and if we're going to expose you, we're going to expose you there. And so, you know, we're still offering advocacy over the phone with those people. We're just not necessarily going in person. One of the biggest barriers, just to touch on that, has been the shift to everything being processed online and over the phone. In particular, we've talked to a lot of clients who do not have the online access that maybe I am blessed with. And so we've done a lot and had to shift a lot of our services to just helping people do forms that no longer are available to sit in an office and fill out, walking them through, making sure they get emailed to the appropriate people, serving as kind of that bridge between the agency and the client if they can't email directly. And so that's been a big change for us, and something that we're adapting to, and we're doing the best we can to make sure that people get what they need, and that the technology is not a barrier for them.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that you're able to continue to provide all of your holistic services. Alicia, COVID, has really impacted my community and really communities all over. And so many folks, including myself, are kind of scared of going to the hospital and to go to the hospital for an exam. So can you tell us about what are the other options that are available?
Sure. I'm going to start off by addressing what the process is when you go to the hospital versus what the other things are. So if you do decide that you do want to have a medical examination, because we are medical providers, COVID is business as usual for us. We are still 24/7 able to do these exams through MedStar. Luckily, at MedStar, although it is obviously the ER and emergency services, we are lucky enough to have our own private suite directly away from the main emergency room, which is kept very clean, sanitized before and after every single patient that goes in there. So if you were to decide to get an exam at the hospital, you would be in a completely separate area with just a nurse like myself and advocacy that can be available on the phone. If you do not want to go into the hospital, another option that exists for you is to make an appointment at our outpatient clinic that we actually have. This can be done two different ways, three technically, but the most common ways that this is done is either through our partner, DC Safe. If someone would like to receive an exam, then the advocate forwards that information to us, and nurses like myself follow up with that patient as soon as we can and see if they would like to make an appointment at our clinic. Another way that we can make an appointment is if the survivor is lucky enough to have the internet, they can actually do a referral form on their own, or they can also call the office and leave a voicemail and we can follow up, like I said, as quickly as possible. One of the main benefits to our clinic is that it is only the nurse and the patient in the entire building right now due to COVID, because most people are working from home. We maintain the same confidentiality, we keep up the same cleaning standards, and we are lucky enough to have plenty of PPE for all of our patients, which means gowns, masks, goggles for both the nurse and the patient. And all that we ask is that you would do a COVID screening form and a COVID screening test, not form, when you arrive there, just to make sure that everything is staying safe. So there are different ways to get an exam. The most common or the most frequently used is through the hospital, but we do have our clinic that is open, luckily, and up and running.
Great, thank you so much. Can you all tell us a little bit about, I know you mentioned kind of how DC Safe and DCFNE work together in collaboration with the advocates available for domestic violence forensic exams that DCFNE performs. Who are some of the other agencies that you might be partnering with to serve survivors in DC?
Sure. So I think maybe the better question sometimes for us is who don't we partner with? Just because one of the things that we really try to do is make sure that we are maintaining relationships with as many of the providers as our clients are going to commonly need. So I talked a little bit about kind of our role and our place that we typically have in the court building and with the courts in the intake center. We have a really close relationship with the DC courts, the domestic violence division, where people might go to file orders of protection, crime victims compensation also, where a lot of people are going to go to look for things like emergency shelter funding, funding for home security if they need to replace a window or change a lock, or that they might submit their medical bills if they were injured as a result of the crime in order to get reimbursed or would get some help paying for that. So we work pretty intensely with them. We also work with the Metropolitan Police Department in that we have a long-running partnership where when they are called out to a scene for domestic violence incidents, we ask that officers then make a referral to us so that we can offer advocacy services to those people. We see a pretty high volume of clients, unfortunately, a year. I'd love one day to work myself out of a job. But one of the other things that we do with our clients is we try to assess for their risk through what's called a lethality assessment. So we talked about strangulation in relation to that. We also asked about things like, do people have guns in the household? Have there been direct threats to kill? Is somebody's violence escalating or happening more frequently? And for those clients that we really identify as being in a high risk category, we also have some formal partnerships through that lethality assessment in order to try to expedite or just kind of put the gas on as much as we can to getting their needs met. So through that, we partner with the police, we partner with the U.S. Attorney's Office, with CSOs, or the Parole and Probation Board, but then also with things like DHS. So let's say somebody needs to remove an abusive partner from their benefits, right? They need to get them off their TANF or off their food stamps. We can do that. With DCHA, if somebody feels like they need to move and they need to transfer a voucher, DC Public Schools. So we have a pretty long list, particularly for those high risk individuals, to try to meet their needs as quickly as we can. That being said, for everybody who's not going to fall in that category, blessedly, we're still going to try to make the same connections if we can. We also partner with the WINT Center and the Women's Center for counseling if that's something people are interested in. And I definitely have to give a big shout out to our legal partners. We work within or make referrals to a legal continuum that consists of a lot of pro bono legal services in the district, legal aid, the DC Volunteer Lawyer Project, Bread for the City, NVRDC, where, you know, for those individuals who are filing orders of protection or generally have legal issues and questions, we send a referral there to try to get the cases picked up. And we've had a lot of help in drafting petitions, something that we normally would do ourselves, but because of the volume and the questions and the needs of people in the community, we've got a lot of help from them in actually completing petitions so that people can maintain access to the courts even if they don't have the technology themselves. So you name it, and we probably know someone. and some of those are more formal partnerships, but we're always trying to press forward and get people what they need.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Kylie, and I just want to jump onto that because there is something that I forgot to mention earlier. One of the common questions that we get as nurses is, well, what if I want to receive an exam, but I'm not ready to go to police, or I don't want any police involvement? And I just want to emphasize that whatever the survivor decides, that is what we go with. We do these forensic examinations with the police in coordination with them, and we also do them completely without police involvement. It is completely up to the client what they want to do, and we are fully aware that a lot of people are uncomfortable going to the police about these things, and it makes no difference in the services that they will receive from us.
Absolutely, and I echo that as well. Our services are confidential, so while we may partner with the police because we want to make sure that if someone has to call them, they then are offered advocacy services. When that same officer calls me the next day to be like, hey, how's Jane Doe? I'm going to be like, I'm sorry, I can't tell you anything. And it's really up to the client whether or not they want further engagement there. So our goal is just to make sure we're accessible as people access, but our services are confidential. And so as people come to us, they get to decide who else they want in their business, is how I usually phrase it.
Okay, great. Thank you all for this very helpful information. Can you tell us how people can access your respective services?
Sure. So, you know, like I said, right now, we don't have the same drop-in center. You know, definitely going to our website, dcsafe.org, is going to give you some information about who we are and what we do. It's got a phone number in there. We have a 1-800 number and also a local number that we use. typically those are phone numbers that we give to service providers, but being where we are now, I think it's fine for everybody to just have them. So you can reach us at 1-800-407-5048 or 202-879-7857.
Would you mind repeating your phone number for me, please?
Sorry, yes, absolutely. 1-800-407-5048 or 202-879-7857. And our advocates answer that phone 24/7. So no matter when you call, and we'll do our best to connect people to the resources that they need.
Great. And Alicia, how can people access DCFNE services?
Okay. In addition to going through DC Safe, a survivor can access the services either by presenting, so showing up to MedStar Washington Hospital Center in person. They can also call a hotline that will direct them to whatever nurse is working on call. That phone number is 1-844-4, then the word help, HELP, DC. And I don't know those actual numbers by heart, but again, it is 1-844-4, HELP, DC. And I would also like to give you our direct office number. If you have any questions or would like to go that route. And our office number here is 202-742-1736. Also, we have a website with all of that information and a referral form.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much. Just to give a quick review, you can look and learn more about DC Forensic Nurse Examiners information and resources and how to access us through our website at dcfne.org. You can learn more at DC Safe at dcsafe.org. And you can always reach out. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. We are accessible 24/7 through the DC Victim Hotline, which again can be reached at 1-844-4-HELP-DC. They also do have a chat function, so if you're tired of calling around, which I understand, we're all tired of phones at this point, you can definitely visit the DC Victim Hotline website and use their chat function. We will be posting this conversation in Spanish the next couple of weeks on our Facebook pages, so look out for that, and thank you so much, and goodbye.